Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take another look at the successor to the Apple Silicon Macs, basically successor to the M1 which we currently have, because there's been some new leaks and some new rumors and I think a lot of hype surrounding the product overall. We also have some purported benchmark results that we're going to take a look at, and I'd like to offer you my insight into all of these leaks and what they mean for us and what we should really understand from all of this. So, first of all, I think we need to discuss Apple's history with its ARM processors and how they actually got to the point of releasing MacBooks with their own silicon inside. We'll do just that right after this. Now, in a recent comment, Pat Gelsinger, Intel's new CEO, referred to Apple as the lifestyle company from Cupertino. That may be a bit of a slight towards Apple and may also be meant as sort of a way for him to embolden his own employees. But in reality, Apple is not really just a lifestyle company. They've been making their own ARM chips for their iPhones and iPads since 2010 with the release of the A4 chip for the first iPad. Since then, they haven't really looked back. Their chips have been consistently getting better and better, so much so that they pretty much set the standard every year, and they're one of two major competitors in the area. It's either their chips or Qualcomm's, which each year take the crown as the most powerful chip in a phone and the most power efficient one and the one with the best photography features built into it. So Apple has gone from strength to strength in terms of ARM processors that it's built for its mobile lineup. So Apple prepared this transition well in advance, and last year it shipped the Apple Developers Transition Kit, basically a Mac Mini enclosure that had an A12Z inside, the same chip that powered the iPad Pro, and it could run early versions of macOS Big Sur. There's actually a very good video. I think it's upscaled from Engadget with Chris. They detail very, very well the so-called secret sauce inside Apple's new chips. Basically, there's nothing out of the ordinary that you would expect. Apple now controls the full technology stack that it's using. So it controls the CPU, the processor, the SoC actually, because the M1 is a system on chip. So it controls the SoC, the hardware, and then it controls the OS coming on top of the hardware. Basically, they make it extremely optimized. The OS is built specifically with this hardware in mind and can take advantage of all of its features. Because of this, in comparison, for instance, with Microsoft, which has to have a very robust and flexible OS with its Windows, which is designed to run on a myriad different configurations, Apple can restrict Mac OS so that it runs on a very few specific specifications and thus can build a very robust, less flexible, but much more heavily optimized and efficient OS. And put together, this makes M1 Macs look fantastic. Benchmarks are not really an indicator, though they score pretty well in benchmarks, and in real life scenarios they are still awesome. There's nothing to take away from these computers, they're absolutely great for what they are. So while taking nothing from the M1 Macs, you need to understand from the get-go that they are built for a specific scenario, running a specific OS on very specific hardware and being the most efficient possible while doing that, which they've achieved. The M1s run excellent. Now, let's look a little bit at the leaks that we have, according to the latest sources, let's say, and let's also look at some purported benchmarks. Now, short disclaimer here. These benchmark results were published on an aggregator called CPU Monkey, if I'm not mistaken. I'll link in the description below. Basically, it's a benchmark aggregator for computer chips, and it gives scores on various benchmarks that these chips have gotten. I don't know how accurate this is. This looks like a guesstimate, more or less, but it's good to take a look at it. And again, with a massive pinch of salt, right? Let's see if these benchmarks are an indicator of what we should expect and what we could expect from the successor to the M1 the M1X/M2, or however else Apple is going to call them. We're going to look together at the leak. The M1X, as they see it, has a similar architecture to the M1, but with 8 performance cores instead of the 4 performance cores now found in the M1. The base frequency is 3.2 gigahertz, and it's the exact same. So basically, it's just an upscaled M1, which we kind of expected. We've seen in other leaks before. And yeah, this is in line with what Apple would do. They've poured a lot of time and resources into developing the M1. It's logical that the next one from it would be an evolution of the M1 architecture rather than a complete replacement of it. If we look at the graphics, similarly, there's a huge jump there. It goes from 128 execution units all the way up to 256. The max GPU memory jumps from 8 gigabytes to 16, but the GPU frequency is the exact same. The only meaningful difference is we go from 2 external displays to 3. So basically a doubling of the GPU inside. There's not a lot of details on Apple's GPU in the M1. It's not widely available information. But basically this would mean a significant increase in performance. Of course, these chips are listed as coming in the Apple MacBook Pro 14-inch and Apple MacBook Pro 16-inch and the 27-inch Apple iMac. These are all rumored. We've heard about them. The 14-inch and 16-inch have been widely reported upon, so a good guess. Now, if we look at the results seem pretty significant. So in single core, because it uses the M1 architecture, we're going to have the same result overall, the same score in benchmarks. But the big jump is going to be allegedly in multi-core. And we're seeing the multi-core performance jump significantly. And probably the most significant aspect of this is that in these benchmark results, the M1X, which is a 45 watt TDP CPU, is being compared against 100 and 140 watt TDP CPUs. So much more beefy CPUs in terms of power draw. So while the M1 had a TDP between 15 and 20 watts, let me double check to be certain, but I think that's really close. Yeah, 15 to 20. The one in the Air was 15, a little bit less powerful. The one in the MacBook Mini was was 20 watts. The M1X is going from 35 watts to 45 watts. So double plus that of the M1, but still significantly less power than the chips it's being compared against. So a significant advantage for Apple there. Now, something that I'd really like to insist on is that these are leaks and rumors and all sorts of stuff, and I would take these with a huge grain of salt. Apple is ridiculously secretive about its stuff, and usually you do not get information before the release. To have real benchmark results actually to be run on the M1X and for them to be leaked into the public like this, it's a bit unlikely. To me, these look like guesstimates and estimations based on the current results of the M1. They look pretty much in line with what I would expect. Perhaps the multi-core score is a bit high, but we'll see when we get there. An important aspect of this is, as I've said, to acknowledge that these are leaks and this is hype that we've probably not really seen associated with this with the computer market in the last few years. Maybe except the Ryzen chips from AMD, they've garnered a lot of attention, but really we're not used to have such big hype in the PC market. That's due to Apple, basically. Apple is very successful, like them or not, fanboy or not, they are tremendously successful. They sell. It seems they have Midas's touch. Whatever segment they go into, they succeed. Let's remember they invented an entire new segment for wireless earphones. They've transformed that into a very successful part of their business. Also, the iPad is doing tremendously well in its sector, even when, for instance, competitor tablets from Android are getting fewer and fewer because they don't have a market. Apple seems to be doing really fine with that. So, yeah, a lot of the attention focused on these computers is because Apple is Apple, and that brings the attention with it. Now, I'd like to discuss the hype part. So, first of all, we need to acknowledge the fact that Apple didn't revolutionize anything here. We're still talking about personal computers. They run applications, they're designed for you to interact with a mouse and a keyboard, and run various applications and do various tasks in your day to day life. So Apple hasn't reinvented anything. If we're objective about it, they weren't even first. Like I've said already, Microsoft has done this twice before. Again, with very limited success, but Apple wasn't the first in this game. And if we're really honest with it, it's not the new M1 Macs and their successors are not even the first personal computers that Apple has released which run on ARM. Do you guess which one I'm referring to? Well, I'll give you a second to think about it. If your guess is the iPad, you're totally right. Since last year's iPad OS 13.5 version, Apple has introduced mouse support, full-fledged mouse support, and keyboard support, like I've told you about in my video about the iPad Air 3. This has meant that the iPad became a replacement for a traditional laptop. Apple's own Magic Keyboard that they also launched at around the same time kind of complements this. It even makes the iPad look very similar to a laptop. And there were tons of videos last year about the iPad being a replacement for a traditional computer. And if I'm being honest to myself, perhaps all of the work that I currently do on the M1 Mac that I have here, I could probably do on an iPad. I can use a browser, I can edit video, I can consume media on it without any sort of trouble. And it has the same kind of advantages like the Mac. It's quiet because it has no fans, it's really lightweight, it has a good design, it has a long battery life, and it's exceptional for productivity if you want it to be. Of course, it's not as powerful as the MacBooks, and it doesn't run a fully fledged desktop grade OS. But iPad OS is supporting the, as I've said, the mouse and the keyboard, and it gives you access to pretty much 80% of what you would need to do with a computer. I even think the gaming aspect is better on the iPad because more games support it than the MacBooks. So, with this being the case, I would suggest you take a step back from this hype. There's been a ton of videos on YouTube about the new Macs and how they're awesome they're gonna be. There's another aspect that nobody seems to be discussing at all, and that's the pricing. Everybody's pouring leaks left and right and building their ultimate Mac in these videos and articles all over the internet. But everyone is kind of forgetting that Apple doesn't necessarily sell cheap stuff. So my guess is the Macs that are gonna come, the 14-inch and the 16-inch MacBooks, they are going to be significantly more pricey than the ones we already have, the M1 Macs. Okay, they are going to be priced above. I think even the 13-inch Pro that I have here, even this is not going to be discontinued. So if you're still in the market for an M1 Mac and you have a budget until $1,500, you should go right ahead, buy the Air or the Pro as you wish, because I seriously doubt the 14-inch will come under this price. The 16-inch, clearly not, okay? Remember that the current 16-inch MacBook Pro, you can configure with the on Apple's website with the Intel i9 inside to $6,000. That's a lot of money, and if I were to bet, I would think that Apple would still cover the same market with the new generation. It's not that they're going to make it much cheaper than the one before, okay? There's one more important aspect to the whole Apple Silicon thing that I don't think anyone has talked about. And while I'm a big fan of the M1 MacBook Pro that I have, and while also I don't consider it a revolutionary device in any way, I think that it is of extreme benefit to me, to you, and to everyone else that Apple has decided to build their own chips. Why? Well, until recently, we've been in an industry, chip manufacturing industry, where there was one major player, Intel, who had complete control of the entire market. And they had a runner-up, AMD, which was always struggling to catch up and which was more focused on the lower-end market, let's say. They could never really compete with Intel in terms of performance. And we've had years and years of stagnation. Intel has been on the 14 nanometer process for what seems to be 1,000 years. It's basically since 2015. But now, in the recent 2 or 3 years, AMD has really caught up to them and is really taking the crown away in terms of performance. And now here comes Apple, who is also proposing their own SoCs, their own chips, which are focused on performance, but also tremendously on efficiency. I think that the appearance of a third competitor is crucial. More competition in the market will benefit us as users. Maybe in 2 years we'll see laptops that have more than 30-hour battery life, and they will get even quieter because they're going to be even more efficient, and they will generate less heat, less noise, and this in the end will benefit everyone. So, I think, again, the hype surrounding Apple's upcoming M1X should really kind of slow down a little bit. I think you should really be careful of all of these rumors. Take them all with a grain of salt, because Apple is very, very secretive. You don't know what they're going to release until the day that they actually release it. There's been leaks around features of their products, but rarely has everything been known in advance. With that being said, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.